Hello, friends, and welcome to Nanobar. Today we're going to break down a number so big it might just make your brain crash. $38 trillion. This isn't a lottery jackpot, it's America's latest credit card bill. In October 2025, the U.S. national debt officially surged past this astronomical figure. The number itself isn't the most frightening part. What's truly terrifying is its acceleration. The U.S. government's debt only just broke the $37 trillion mark in August 2025. This means that in just over 2 months, it increased by another $1 trillion. This is the fastest $1 trillion accumulation outside of the COVID-19 pandemic period. Still can't quite grasp what $1 trillion means? Well, let's break it down further. Over the past year, the debt increased by a total of $2.17 trillion. That's an average increase of $5.96 billion per day, an average increase of $248 million per hour, and an average increase of $68,964.33 per second. In the few minutes it takes you to read this article, the U.S.DBT might have increased by tens of millions of dollars. Now, let's look at the personal nightmare bill, which is what truly hits home. This $38 trillion isn't just an abstract government figure. It's ultimately a bill that every American has to pay. As of October 2025, the U.S. population is approximately 342 million, meaning each American, including newborns, is responsible for $111,262. Even worse, over the past year, the per capita debt burden for each person increased by another $6,392.66. For an average family, this amount might be more than their hard-earned retirement savings for an entire year. This is no longer a problem for future generations. It's a wealth transfer happening right now, from your future savings to pay the government's current bills. You might ask, hey, what does Washington's debt have to do with an ordinary person like me? It has a lot to do with you. It's directly siphoning off your money through 3 hidden channels. The first hidden channel is inflation. When the government spends far more money than it takes in each year, it has to borrow to fill the gap. This is like injecting massive amounts of new money into the economy, but the goods on the shelves remain the same. More money, no more goods, and the result is rising prices. This is called upward cost pressure. The darker truth is that inflation is not just a side effect of debt, it is itself a hidden tax. The government is the biggest debtor, and if the currency depreciates, doesn't the real value of its $38 trillion debt shrink? The government soft defaults through inflation, and you pay for this invisible tax at the supermarket as your savings purchasing power is diluted. The second hidden channel is soaring interest rates, which affect your mortgage and car loans. Every year, the government has to borrow trillions of dollars in the financial markets, competing with you and all businesses for the same money. This is called the crowding out effect. To attract investors to lend it money, the government must offer higher interest rates. And this U.S. Treasury bond rate is the benchmark for global finance. The result is that banks won't lend you money at an interest rate lower than the risk-free Treasury bond rate. So your bills become mortgage rates soaring from 2.8% to 7.8%. New car loan rates rising from 5% to 8.4%. Credit card rates climbing from 14.8% to 21.8%. Every time you pay a high monthly installment, you are paying for the crowding out effect of the national debt. The third hidden channel is stagnant wages. When businesses also face the same high borrowing costs as the government, they have less capital available for investment. Less investment equals lower productivity, and productivity is the only long-term source of real wage growth. Facing this massive $38 trillion debt, everyone is up in arms. Let's look at 5 mainstream viewpoints. The first group are the doomsayers. Their slogan is, America is going bankrupt, the dollar is going to collapse, go buy gold and Bitcoin. Their logic is that the U.S. is already caught in a debt doomsday spiral. The government's only way out is to print money indefinitely, ultimately leading to the collapse of fiat currency, meaning the U.S. dollar. The second group are supporters of modern monetary theory. Their slogan is, don't worry, as long as the debt is in its own currency, the government will never go bankrupt. Their logic is that the U.S. can always print more money to pay off its debts. The only limit is inflation, not the total amount of debt. However, mainstream critics argue that this theory could lead to disastrous consequences, causing hyperinflation. The third group are the fiscal hawks. Their slogan is, we must cut spending immediately, stop all waste. Their logic is the traditional conservative view, demanding fiscal austerity. However, mainstream critics argue that this is politically dishonest. They only dare to talk about cutting small expenses like foreign aid, but completely avoid touching the real drivers of debt, Social Security and Medicare, which are the third-rail issues. The fourth group are mainstream economists, who believe this is the real minefield. Their slogan is, "Friends, you're missing the point. The problem isn't the total debt, it's the interest." They feel that what truly kills you isn't your total credit card balance, but the ridiculously high minimum monthly payment. Their logic is that for the past 20 years, although debt was high, interest rates were extremely low, so the repayment pressure was minimal. But now, the situation has changed. Interest rates have doubled. The average interest rate on federal debt has more than doubled since 2022. Costs are soaring. The annualized cost of maintaining this debt now stands at $1.216 trillion. In fiscal year 2024, the U.S. government's net interest expenditure was $879.9 billion, already exceeding the defense budget of $873.5 billion. This is the debt spiral. The government now has to borrow more money to pay increasing interest costs. The fifth group are ordinary citizens, whose slogan is, "What does it have to do with me?" They feel, "I can't even pay my own bills, so why should I care about the government's bills?" This is precisely what we need to focus on today. You must care about the government's bills because the government's bills are a major reason why you can't pay your own bills. This is like what we discussed earlier with inflation, interest rates, and wages. So what? Just default. Anyway, most of the debt is owed to China. Friends, this is the biggest misconception. You might think your creditor is your neighbor and you're about to default. But when you pull out your ledger, you find that 90% of the money you owe has your parents and your own names on it. This is the truth. If the US government were to default, it wouldn't be punishing China. It would be economic and political suicide. Let's look at who actually holds this $38 trillion debt. First, there's intergovernmental debt, approximately $7.4 trillion. This is money the government owes to itself, essentially IOUs. The largest creditor is the Social Security Trust Fund, holding $2.4 trillion. This is money the government owes to American retirees. Second, there's publicly held debt, approximately $30.6 trillion. This is real money borrowed in the open market. Who bought it? Part A consists of domestic holders, meaning Americans, holding $21.5 trillion. Of this, the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank, holds $4.55 trillion. U.S. mutual funds, meaning retirement accounts and individual investment portfolios, hold $4.42 trillion. State and local governments hold $1.7 trillion. U.S. pension funds hold $0.97 trillion. Other holders, such as banks, insurance companies, and individuals, hold $9.86 trillion. Part B consists of foreign holders. China is not number one. First is Japan, with approximately $1.1 trillion. Second is China, with approximately $0.8 trillion. Third is the United Kingdom, with approximately $0.7 trillion. Do you understand now? If the US government were to default, it would simultaneously destroy the Social Security Trust Fund, which would ruin American retirees. It would detonate the US pension system and mutual funds, causing your 401k to instantly evaporate. Because a hard default is suicide, the government is left with only one path, which is what we discussed earlier, soft default, through inflation. By diluting the purchasing power of money, all savers and wage earners are made to pay the chronic bill. Friends, having seen all this, the conclusion is clear. The true crisis of $38 trillion is not a ticking time bomb that will suddenly explode one day in the future, but a chronic suffocation of the economy that has already arrived. This unsustainable fiscal path is manifesting its ill effects through slow erosion. Permanently high capital costs. High interest rates for buying homes and cars are no longer temporary but structural. Loss of economic vitality. The government siphons off all capital to pay interest, leaving the private sector with less money for innovation, and naturally, employee wages stagnate. A doomsday loop for the budget. Interest payments devour everything, crowding out every penny for education, research, and infrastructure. Ultimately, we return to that $111,262 per capita bill. This bill isn't something to be paid in the future. It has already arrived, and contemporary individuals are paying this heavy legacy penny by penny through higher prices, more expensive loans, and lost opportunities.